All right. I may have a little bit of news. Just to start off with just to stay on the topic, with an update from our OCHA colleagues about the situation in Gaza. They tell us that about 69,000 liters of fuel entered Gaza from Egypt yesterday. The Israeli authorities have confirmed that they would start allowing the entry of a daily amount of approximately 70,000 liters of fuel from Egypt, which, while good, remains well below the minimal requirement for essential humanitarian operations. Fuel is set to be distributed by UNRWA. UNRWA also tells us that they will, with that, they will support food distribution and the operation of generators at hospitals, water sanitation facilities, shelters, and other critical services. Yesterday, UNRWA and UNICEF distributed some 19,500 liters of fuel to water and sanitation facilities south of Wadi Gaza, enabling them to operate the generators and resume their operation. That amount of fuel is expected to last about 24 hours. To the north of Wadi Gaza, all water and sanitation facilities are presumed to be shut down. No distribution of bottled water has been taking place since the start of the Israeli ground operations on the 28th of October, raising grave concerns about dehydration and waterborne diseases. UNRWA has also reported that the number of fatalities in the attacks that directly hit Al-Fakhuri school in Jabalia on November 18th is at least 24 people and others injured. At the time of the incident, the facilities were sheltering about 7,000 internally displaced persons. In a statement that you saw yesterday, the Secretary General said he was deeply shocked that 2 UNRWA schools were struck in less than 24 hours in Gaza. Dozens of people and children were killed and injured as they were seeking safety in United Nations premises. The Secretary General reaffirmed that UN premises are inviolable. He also reiterated his call for immediate humanitarian ceasefire. Also, I was asked about the incident that took place in the Red Sea concerning the ship, and I can tell you that while the circumstances surrounding the incident remains unclear, we're following with deep concern the reports of seizure by the Houthis of a vessel flying the Bahamian flag in the Red Sea and reportedly en route between Turkey and India. We reaffirm the importance of ensuring that international be respected in full in relation to maritime navigation, the freedom of navigation. We urge all concerned parties and countries in the region to exercise maximum restraint and refrain from taking any escalatory actions. Back here this morning, you saw the Secretary General launch of the UNEP 2023 emissions gap report, which is not good news, and says that if nothing changes, in 2030 emissions will be 22 gigatons higher than the 1.5 degree limit will allow. That's roughly the total present annual emissions of the US, China, and the European Union combined. That report was, of course, shared with you. He also announced that later today he will travel to Chile and then on to Antarctica to see the deadly impact of the climate crisis. Scorching temperatures mean Antarctic ice is melting faster with deadly consequences for people around the world. While in Antarctica, he's expected to stop and see the Colin and Nelson glaciers. It will also stop at the Kopaitik Island, which is home to penguins and other species which are being impacted by climate change. The Secretary General will be accompanied on this trip by the President of Chile, Gabriel Boric. The Secretary General will also take his experiences in Antarctica to COP28 in Dubai next week, where he will call for action that matches the scale of crisis we face. We expect him back in New York on Sunday, and we have penciled in on Monday afternoon a stakeout with him, which he will answer some of your questions. The Security Council also met this morning, and the Secretary General spoke at their session, their debate on the vital link between development and sustaining peace. He told Council members that development by itself is not enough to secure peace, but it is essential. No peace is secure without inclusive and sustainable development that leaves no one behind. Noting that development gains are often among the first casualties of war. The closer a country is to the conflict, the farther it is from sustainable and inclusive development. By contrast, he added that human development lights the way to hope, promoting prevention, security, and peace. This is why advancing peace and advancing sustainable, inclusive development go hand in hand, he said. Those remarks were shared with you. A couple of peacekeeping updates. The first from Mali, where a peacekeeping mission there, MINUSMA, tells us that it has closed its base in Asongo in the Gao region of eastern Mali and is handed over to civilian authorities, and that took place on Saturday. Over the past decade of service in Asongo, peacekeepers played a key role in stabilizing the area and contributing to reducing the impact of terrorist groups in support of local authorities and the Malian defense and security forces. The UN mission noted that these efforts include securing the transporter road that connects Niger to Mali, which has been vital to the country and the broader region. To protect civilians and restore state authority, the mission also undertook numerous activities, including building and equipping facilities for the Malian armed forces and local police, providing fuel for their security patrols, and securing an airstrip for humanitarian evacuations. The peacekeeping mission in Mali also provided basic services to help prevent community conflict and improve living conditions, including access to safe drinking water and electricity. Despite these improvements, persistent insecurity remains a challenge, mainly due to the limited presence of national authority. The Asongo camp is the 9th of 13 bases that have closed under MINUSMA's plan to withdraw from Mali by December 31st. That's in line, of course, with Security Council wishes. The Mopti base will close in early December, and the liquidation phase of the remaining sites in Timbuktu, Gao, and Bamako will get underway on the 1st of the year. And from Abyei, our peacekeeping mission there, UNISFA, has strongly condemned attacks by groups of armed youths on villages in the area around Angat, Wumpet, and Korioch yesterday, which resulted in a number of people killed and injured. It also reports that, contrary to what was reported in a number of media outlets over the weekend, no UN peacekeeper was killed or wounded during these incidents. In response to the attack, UNISFA moved quickly to enhance security in the impacted area by intensifying patrols, closely monitoring the situation, and engaging with the relevant communities. And going back to West Africa and Niger, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that last week, on November 14th, to be precise, 320 tons of therapeutic nutritional product from the World Food Program arrived in Niamey as part of trucks transporting humanitarian goods, which entered the country through Burkina Faso. This was the first entry of humanitarian goods in the country since July 26th. More humanitarian transport, including medicines, medical equipment, water and sanitation items, and therapeutic foods from UNICEF are on their way to Niger, and those will be arriving from Togo to Kaya in Burkina Faso. This is a welcome development for a humanitarian organization whose stocks were almost depleted while the needs remain high across the country, as we've been reporting. To give you a sense of the needs, 4.3 million people need humanitarian assistance in Niger, including 3.3 million people who are food insecure, according to the latest food security analysis. Our humanitarian partners working on statistics for next year will be communicating those figures towards the end of the year. And crossing the continent back to the east, in Somalia, our colleagues and our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that heavy rains and floods have impacted 1 million people in the past week alone. This brings the total number of people impacted since the start of the floods in early October to 1.7 million. The number of people displaced also continues to increase and has reached more than 640,000. According to our partners, at least 41 people have been killed, including 12 children. Roads, bridges, and airstrips have been damaged in many parts of the country, hampering the movement of people and supplies and leading to higher prices of basic commodities. OCHA warns that suspected cases of acute watery diarrhea and cholera are expected to rise. Our humanitarian partners The authorities of local communities have stepped up assistance to impacted people. More than 740,000 men, women, and children received life-saving assistance since October. Despite the rapidly growing needs of funding for the humanitarian work, response remains low. With 6 weeks in the year remaining, the humanitarian response plan for Somalia is only 40% funded. And you will have seen over the weekend we issued a statement in Liberia where the Secretary General commended the government and people of Liberia for the 2023 presidential and legislative elections, which took place in a calm and peaceful manner. These were the first general elections since the closing of the United Nations mission in Liberia in 2018. The Secretary General reaffirms the continued support of the UN to the people of Liberia in their efforts to consolidate peace, democracy, and sustainable development. International days. Today is Africa Industrialization Day. In his message, the Secretary General says that accelerating Africa's industrialization is vital for growth, diversifying economies, and combating poverty. And today is, of course, World Children's Day. UNICEF tells us that 400 million children, or about 1 in every 5 child, is living in or fleeing from conflict zones. But beyond conflict, children's rights are also under threat. These include rising poverty, inequality, public health emergencies, and of course, the global climate crisis. Mr. Klein.
Thank you. This question regards the shipment of fuel into Gaza. First of all, are those shipments going directly to UNRWA personnel?
Yes.
And secondly, what monitoring process, if any, is in place to make sure that the fuel gets to where it's needed, hospitals, et cetera, rather than being perhaps stolen by Hamas?
UNRWA has decades and decades of experience of working in Gaza and ensuring that monies and supplies go to whom it's intended. The fuel goes to UN-run facilities, including health centers and others. So it remains as far as I know, it remains in the custody of the UN the whole time. Margaret.
Just to follow up on the fuel, okay, so it's supposed to be 140,000 liters every 48 hours, so I guess that means you said they got 69. So
yeah, it's at
half
70
of it.
about a day.
So are they
Yeah.
going to do it, they're going to
70 a
split
day.
it and go daily. But then there's supposed to be another 20,000 liters for Paltel, the communications entity. Is that going to go through UNRWA
I don't
also,
know.
or directly
It's
to
a
them?
very valid question, and I will
Because-
check.
And can you check and see if it was delivered?
I will check everything you asked me to check.
Thanks.
Deji, and then I will get there.
Also, a couple of follow-ups. First, on the follow-ups, also on the fuel. You just mentioned that 70,000 liters of fuel each day. It's below the minimum requirements. Can we know what?
Yeah, I mean,
what would be the minimum requirements?
As I was reading it, that was my question. I believe it's in the hundreds of thousands, but I'll check what the volume would be to meet the actual needs.
So the second follow-up, you just mentioned that the Secretary General issued a statement on the attack on 2 UNRWA schools there. I know this question sounds stupid, but I have to confirm this. Do these schools have Hamas bases or weapons in there? Because I think it's UNRWA school. You guys knows the situation.
These schools were there to shelter civilians, right? They are not there to shelter combatants. The coordinates of these schools have been communicated. These schools didn't pop up overnight. They've been there for a long, long time. It is unacceptable that people seeking shelter under the UN flag be then confronted with these types of bombings.
Okay, so one last question. This question is concerning the climate crisis. I think today there has been a report released called Climate Equality, a planet for the 99%, which in this report, it says that in 2019, the super-rich 1% were responsible for 16% of global carbon emissions, which is the same as the emissions of the poorest 66% of the humanity. Just want to know, what does the Secretary General has to say of these findings?
First of all, we have no doubt as to the solid scientific base of what our Oxfam colleagues put together. And it is yet another glaring example of the impact of inequality that we see in the world, that impacts not only basic services, people's lives, but climate as well.
But then what does the UN think the super rich 1% should do?
People should be more responsible and think of others. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I'll get to you in a second.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you have any update on the possibility of opening the Kerem Shalom crossing.
No update. And as I said, as soon as, if there was a positive answer, we would share that with you pretty quickly.
But are there any ongoing negotiations?
Yeah, I mean, this is something we've been in discussions with the Israeli authorities and been pushing for.
Thank you.
Okay. Anade.
Steph, my question is, last week you said that Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo was traveling to the region, and if I remember correctly, you said her diplomatic efforts would start on Sunday, which is yesterday. You also mentioned that she'd be meeting with Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian officials. Can you give us any details as to who she'll be meeting with, any readouts we'll be able to get, or any discussions
It's a
she's
very
had so
good
far?
question. It's information I should have had. I know she met with a number of Israeli counterparts yesterday. But let me get, I'll try to get a further readout
Thank you.
for you. Sharifat, and then Mike, and then we'll go to the screen.
Thank you, Stéphane. I actually have a follow-up from the briefing to you. So during the WHO's briefing, I think it was Mike who said that they have the mandate to verify all information that relates to the attacks on healthcare facilities. They publish that information, and they also report that information back to the Secretary General. And then it's the Secretary General who has the task, who has the mandate to task any other bodies, such as the ICC, to investigate. So, considering that there are about 350 attacks on healthcare facilities since the beginning of the crisis, is the Secretary General planning to task any bodies like the ICC to investigate? Thank you.
I will get back to you on all of the questions you've asked. Because I have to check the legal pathways. I mean, Mike was talking about things that I was not aware of, but there's a lot of things I'm not aware of. So I know you are. Mushfiq, I have to apologize because I know you wanted to ask a question on Friday and I ran away quickly. So go ahead, please.
No, thank you, Stéphane. Very quick. Bangladesh government announced its election schedule on January 7 in crackdown on opposition and rejected calls from the international community for a political solution. I'm wondering what steps the Secretary General is going to take to ensure a free, fair, and credible election in Bangladesh, as government rejected the international power.
We continue to call on all stakeholders, the government, the political parties, to do whatever they can to promote a peaceful, inclusive, and credible elections. Mike, sorry, I skipped you, didn't I? Sorry, I apologize.
Don't worry about it.
I feel it's Friday today for some reason, and
Every day is Friday right now. The
Yeah,
energy is it's exhausting. What is the responsibility for UN workers and those affiliated with UN agencies to report Hamas's usage of UN facilities for military purposes? Is there a procedure in place? Who do they go to, and how far up the chain of command does that work?
You know, we had. I would refer you to investigations and reports that were done after in past conflicts in Gaza, where we reported very transparently what we had found in that regard. The focus right now is, and I think as Rob put it very clearly, is on keeping people safe. But every time there's been investigations after previous conflict, we've been very clear and we've shared with you all of those findings.
Are there any adjustments made within while the conflict is going on? Are there any communications with Hamas after a report of their presence?
Well, we have repeatedly called for combatants not to use our facilities, not to fire to our facilities or from our facilities or near our facilities. Stefano.
Thank you, Stéphane. Just a follow-up on this. I know that was asked before, but just to clarify. Let's say if actually Hamas is using some of those facilities, even just for hiding, and there are children, civilians, family that there are instead finding shelter, what the international law says, can Israel actually shoot
Look,
at this?
I think the international humanitarian law is very clear, right? And it's not for me to give you a synopsis of it. I would encourage you to read. I would encourage you to read the Geneva Conventions for yourselves, because I think that's the best way for you to form.
I understand.
So we have repeatedly called for premises, UN premises, not to be used in combat, right? But as far as what international law says, international law is not a secret. Read it for yourself.
No, I understand. But then when we ask you if Israel is committing crime against humanity or war crimes, then the answer that you give is there will be investigation, or there will be. Why that? Why you can't say?
Because there will need to be accountability, and I think the Secretary General answered that specific question when Kirsten asked this morning. Maggie, go ahead.
In previous Gaza conflicts, when UNRWA installations have been hit, been damaged, the UN did approach Israel for reparations or compensation, however you want to call it. Will you be doing that again in this conflict?
I have no doubt there will be full investigations done in order to have accountability once this conflict is over. Our focus right now is, in Gaza, for our colleagues in Gaza, is a humanitarian one.
Can you just remind us if Israel ever paid any of that compensation?
I will check. I think there were some discussions. Go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll make this very quick.
Doesn't mean it won't be painful. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm
I
kidding.
wouldn't do
Go
that.
ahead, Joe. I'm happy to go, Joe. I'm all smiles and all ears.
Okay, just briefly, could you give us any update, if you have one, on where the negotiations are going with the release of 50 to 70 hostages in return for 4 or 5 day pause? There were reports that this was very close to being completed, and I assume the UN has had some part in these discussions. Could you just give us a general sense where it stands?
No, I won't for the reason that there's so much riding on this. And there are obviously discussions going on, very intensive discussions, but I will leave it at that.
Sorry, you opened the can of worms yourself. Yesterday in the Secretary General's statement that you sent out, the last paragraph, he thanked Qatar for their mediation. Was that a direct reference to the hostage negotiations?
Yeah, Secretary General's been in touch with the Prime Minister, Foreign Minister of Qatar, with the Emir. It's not a secret that Qatar has been playing a pivotal role on a number of issues, but notably on the issues of hostages. Okay, programming note. This is my Friday because I will not be here until the rest of the week. Fahan will be here Tuesday and Wednesday. We're closed on Thursday. Stay away. Friday we will, unless there is breaking news, we will only post highlights. But we'll have duty team, and we will see you back on Monday, and hopefully the SG will have a stakeout on Monday, which means I don't have to brief.
Did you say what time that was going to be?
No, I did not say what time.
Happy thanks.